So here to discuss as much as we can about that and the week's top political headlines is the host of the WGN Political Report, Paul Lisnek. Paul, thank
Another
you for
busy
coming
week.
in.
Very
I know,
busy week.
It never ends. Let's start with what's happening with Elon Musk.
Yeah.
The president sounded pretty defensive there. Let me ask you, do you think that this is the beginning of a power dynamic shift between those two groups, Doge and the cabinet?
Well, so let's understand that nobody enters the government as a secretary, for example, because they don't want power. So the egos that you're dealing with in that group are huge. So they run a department. Marco Rubio runs a State Department. They have their own departments, and they want to make decisions. And they're not appreciating somebody from the outside coming in and telling them, here's who's going to work for you and here who's not. So, you could almost take the personalities out of it. We might all feel that way if we were a secretary. Is that a change in the dynamics? I think what you're seeing is an exerting of their own status and power now that's starting to come through. As I understood that meeting, Trump kind of watched it all played out, and then in the end, he backed his cabinet secretaries up. But remember, he also said, but if you can't figure it out, well, then Elon will come back. So I'm not sure what the dynamic, whether there's much of a break in the dynamic between Trump and Musk yet. But clearly, the secretaries are exerting their power, and Trump seems to be behind them doing that.
All right, let's talk tariffs now. I think a lot of people's heads have been spinning with this.
Why?
We're going to impose a tariff. Just kidding. We're going to pause it back and forth.
Yeah.
Do you feel that Trump is using this approach as a negotiating tactic, or is he truly trying to change the world economy?
Well, first of all, the confusion, what people do need to understand is this: they're on for Mexico, they're off for Mexico. Canada, you're back on. Canada, right, all of that. That itself is making the markets unstable. So when people sort of say, well, if the tariffs increase, then we're going to see rates go up, all that kind of thing. Those effects are happening because of the confusion of the markets. Because you don't buy something today that you're going to use tomorrow. You buy it 3 weeks or a month ahead of time or something like that. And so as they talk to farmers and all sorts of people, they're saying, I don't know what to do.
The auto manufacturers.
Auto manufacturers, exactly, have to sort of plan ahead. So you're already seeing that sort of turmoil. Is it a strategy? I don't know. If it's a strategy, it's probably not the best one because, look, Trump said the other day when the markets were kind of tanking and he said, I didn't look at the stock market. Now, look, there's a lot of people that might say they didn't look at the stock market, and Donald Trump is not one of them. He lives for that market, and he knows exactly what's going on. So I think he did look at it, was not happy with what he's saying. I think what we're seeing now is more a reflection of that and him trying to kind of get things shored up. But the notion of on, off, if that is a strategy, it's not one I've ever seen. And
what about Russia? Because we heard today that he threatened even tariffs on Russia if they don't come to the table for this peace deal with Ukraine.
He did, but let's juxtapose that with the fact that he's cutting off supplies to Ukraine. He's cutting off intelligence to Ukraine. So he's really setting them up just to be doomed. Those are decisions that he has made just in the last day or so. So yes, he's saying Russia better sit down at the table or I'll come after you with, I don't know what he's going to tear up with them, but I'm going to come after you whenever you want to say, okay, but if you want the deal, why are you putting Ukraine in a position where they can hardly survive when you cut off the intelligence and you cut off the means of survival? What are you doing? So I don't know. It's unclear what he's really after here. If he wants everybody at the table, you probably got to stop doing that stuff and then put the threats on Russia to get him to sit down.
Sort of on that same topic, the Defense Department said it is suspending cyber
cyber intelligence. That's what I was referring to.
But against Russia. But do you feel like that is just public appeasement of President Putin, or is there still safety that will be regarded when this is all said and done?
Look, if you take a step out of it, Ray, and you can't ignore the fact that in recent, such as the UN vote last week, the United States has voted with Russia, with North Korea. That world order, as I indicated last week, is changing a bit. We're not standing with Europe. We're not standing with our traditional allies. And so when he sort of says I'm taking Russia to task or I'm making things tough with them, we also know that every time he talks to Putin, he doesn't like to talk about it. He'll tell you everybody else he talked to, but ask him about Putin, I don't want to talk about it. So it's just he doesn't give us a lot of confidence that whatever's going on there is above board and clean. Now, some could say it's amazing, it's four-dimensional chess, and he knows exactly, he's got Putin in place and all that sort of thing. I don't have that same confidence in that. Again, we'll see how it plays out.
You hope he's right, though, because it puts the United States potentially in peril, it would seem.
Well, that's exactly right. So that's why you hope that if what he is saying, that he does have Russia in some sort of place, okay, fine, let's see it play out. But it's not the way it's looking right now. And obviously, you have European nations meeting to talk about how we're going to proceed without the United States going forward. Whoever thought we would be living in a world with that? And I understand that our viewers who are Trump supporters are going to blame Europe and say that, this is their fault, Trump isn't doing anything. But, they're doing what they're doing, and they have legitimate concerns. And these are also leaders that we respect as well. So they're doing what they think they need to do.
So earlier this week, we saw Trump's joint address to Congress
Right.
and all of the Democratic lawmakers in there. We saw several acts of protest and defiance, the signs they were holding up, and
Really
Al
weak.
Green that was escorted out. What did you think about that show or what they were trying to do there?
I think the Democrats are floundering. They need leadership. They really don't have anybody there's no Barack Obama in that group right now, if you want to point to him as a leader. The holding the signs up, what was the point? I mean, unless the camera caught a glimpse of it. When Al Green was shouting out, we all remember in 2009 when Joe Wilson yelled out, "You lie" at Barack Obama. We all heard it, and that was a sound that I think I can still hear it in my head.
Same thing Marjorie Taylor Greene said.
Yes, exactly. But Al Green was, and I
We
know
heard
we're all watching.
mandate. He kept saying a mandate.
I couldn't pick up what he was talking about.
Yeah.
We had to learn later when he gave a press
Right.
conference. He said, I was saying you don't have a mandate when it comes to cutting Medicaid. Okay, fine. But here's the thing. So when he got tossed out and you see his Democratic colleagues just watching him go, where were they to walk out with him if you want to make a statement? And then when his censure comes out, 10 Democrats voted for it. Now, I understand that a lot of people who, especially Republicans, Trump supporters, they think he should be censured. I'm not saying he shouldn't be. But what I'm saying is your question, where is the strategy among Democrats? There's no, even there, they're sort of, well, that's an inappropriate thing to do. Republicans will stand together. Trump always likes to say that Democrats stand together and Republicans don't. It's really quite the opposite. And so until the Democrats can come up with a strategy, a view, an argument, even all of this about the transgender issues in sports and all of that, that's a more important issue in people's minds, whether it should or shouldn't be. It's a more important issue in their minds than the Democrats recognize that it is. So the Democrats keep talking about egg prices, and egg prices are very high. But what did Trump do in his speech? He blamed everything on Biden. And what pushback has there been from the Democrats?
How long do you think the Democratic Party has to try to find somebody to coalesce around, mount some sort of fight that will be effective? I mean, do they have all the way till, a few months before the midterms?
Well, it's a great question because the midterms are next, and the midterm is, of course, not a presidential election, so it's members of Congress and that sort of thing. I just think for the party's own sake, they need somebody who can start emerging. The point is, I don't think that person emerging is going to be from the House or from the Senate. We don't see anybody there who that could be. It could be a governor. It could be somebody we're not even aware of right now who begins, Josh Shapiro, for example, from Pennsylvania. Somebody who exhibits that strength. But I think you're right, Ray, that it's going to happen more closer to the midterm time. Somebody who can sort of, corral the Democrats together to do what they need to do. But right now, they just don't have anybody, and I think they're floundering. And I don't think they would fight you on that. I mean, they might try and defend it, but they wouldn't fight you on it.
Also this week, we saw Mayor Brandon Johnson testify on the Hill. What did you think of his testimony?
Well, we said last week, maybe he was watching us because I said, be careful what you say because you're under oath and they will do everything they can to use it against you. He is in a lawsuit right now. I think he didn't hurt himself. He stood up fairly strongly when confronted. And of course, you saw a lot of the cheap shots being taken by members of that. And, some LaHood, Congressman LaHood from here. But of course, he's Illinois, so he knows him better than anybody, hitting him with popularity ratings and all that kind of stuff. It all may have been true and legitimate. But at the same time, as Johnson would say from time to time, hey, I'm here to talk about our welcoming city policies. So, let's focus in on that. Byron Donalds, a congressman from Florida who's going to be running for governor of Florida, is as MAGA as they come. And he really you don't know your numbers. You don't know your statistics and all that. Some of that may be fair, but I will give Johnson credit. He actually stood up to most of that.
I was going to say, I guess it depends on where you stand on the sanctuary city status.
Yeah.
But did he kind of raise his political capital in any measure? Because it has been pretty low since taking office.
I don't know. I'd say that. To be honest, I think I'd just say he didn't hurt himself.
Okay.
So to say that he really built up the argument, I'm not sure if he were sitting here, he'd say, yes, I did. Okay. I would just think and by the way, going into what he was going into, that sort of den of danger, I'll give him credit for saying, look, Mr. Mayor, you didn't hurt yourself. That's good.
Did you feel all the mayors, it was Denver, New York,
Boston,
they all
gave
kind of fared
Mayor
the
Will
same?
a tough time from Boston. They all pretty much held. Again, it wasn't so much about them. This was a lot of the Republicans on the committee who had points to make and shows to put on. They did it.
Yeah.
They accomplished what they wanted to do. Where does all that take us? Who knows?
Are you going to be grandstanding this weekend for the political show?
Well, we got a little grandstanding now. I'm going to have a professor on from Northwestern. His name is Professor Mark Whitty. He's an economist. So we're going to talk about all this tariff stuff, and I'm going to try and ask him some questions that everybody wonders about, like who actually does pay the tariffs and all that. We'll get that out, and then we'll give everybody some updates on what's going on in Washington and Springfield. It'll be a fun political report that I'll give you a wake-up call to make sure you're
All
up watching.
right.
Sunday
Sure,
morning,
Paul.
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
Always a
great
pleasure to
weekend.
see
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks, folks.